Hello, I'm Mark Price. I'd like to talk to you about being together in the Spirit. There was a young boy one day talking to God, and he asked God, he said, God, what is a million years like to you? And God said to the young boy, he said, well, a million years to you is like 1 second to me. The young boy said, He said, God, what is $1 million like to you? And God says, well, $1 million to you is like 1 penny to me. The young boy said, He said, God, could I have one of your pennies? God looked at it and said, in a second. There you have it. Anticipation. Together in the Spirit. The gospel today is the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 11, verses 25 to 30. At that time, Jesus exclaimed, I give praise to you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, for although you have hidden these things from the wise and the learned, you have revealed them to little ones. Yes, Father, such has been your gracious will. All things have been handed over to me by my Father. No one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and anyone to whom the Son wishes to reveal him. Come to me, all you who labor and are burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am meek and humble of heart, and you will find rest for yourselves. For my yoke is easy and my burden light. The gospel of the Lord. So in this gospel today, Jesus is saying, come to me and I will give you rest. You have burdens, and certainly in our world today, we're filled with burdens, overloaded with burdens, with just not working, partially working, income is bad, families pushed together for long extended quarantine times. We've got burdens. And Jesus is saying, turn to me and come to me. Who is this Jesus, though? And in these readings today, and I'm not going to read the others, but I'm going to try to thread the first reading, the second reading together with this gospel reading. In the first reading from the prophet Zechariah, he tells us that the Messiah will come and ride a donkey into Jerusalem. Well, Jesus rode a donkey into Jerusalem. Now, how did this prophet know this 500 years before Jesus was born? Well, because God spoke to the minds and the hearts of the prophets. This Jesus who is saying, come to me and I'll take on your load, let us be yoked together, you who are heavy laden, he was prophesied by numerous people, including the prophet Zechariah in today's first readings. So the people of Israel were looking forward to the Messiah coming. Prophets prophesied that he was going to come. And sure enough, he came into the world. And then Paul says we must be linked in the Spirit. In fact, he specifically says, whoever does not have the Spirit of Christ does not belong to him. That's what Paul is telling us. So the first reading, Jesus is prophesied. The second reading saying that we must have the Spirit dwelling within us, and whoever does not have the Spirit of Christ does not belong to him. And then in the gospel, Jesus is saying how we get this Spirit. So first of all, this is an important person, Jesus. People knew about him, longed for him, anticipated him hundreds and hundreds of years before he was born. He came into this earth for one purpose, to die for us. And all he wants us to do is come to him. Paul says to be one with him means to be one with him and allow the Spirit to dwell in us. And Jesus in the gospel is saying how we make that happen. And Jesus says we do it by being childlike. The only way we're fully going to truly grasp and understand that the prophecies of old are real, that the Spirit can and will dwell in us, and what that means is if we are childlike. Now, what does that mean? It doesn't mean childish, it means childlike. So I have some traits that I'm going to share with you very quickly. I'll make a couple comments maybe on one or two of them, and future reflections I'll go more in depth to these traits of being childlike as adults. First, what is a child? Child is curious. we have to be curious. We will never fully grasp, understand, or deeply embrace who Jesus is if we're not curious. Children are always curious. They're always wondering. I used to think that one of the reasons that time went so slowly when we were children was that everything was awesome. Everything was new. We were awestruck. As we get older, it's more been there, done that. So where is that curiosity? To be childlike, let's work on getting that curiosity back, asking questions and being awestruck by the world around us. Wanting to explore is a trait. Children are always going off trying to explore where they haven't been before or something new. Behind my home where I grew up was a mountain. Now it's covered with houses, but back then you could ride horses on it, you'd hike on it. We were always going off and exploring. We have to be people who are childlike, who explore, having an imagination, thinking outside of ourselves. I think as adults, we get so closed in. Instead of being like this, we start closing in. Been there, done that, as I said a moment ago, but also we're not thinking outside the 9 box, as it were, accepting others. Do you ever notice how children are very accepting of strangers? That makes us as parents scared sometimes, because a child can be very accepting, and we have to warn them, hey, when you're in a park or you're in a grocery store, you have to be careful when strangers come up. But children are very accepting. And we are to be accepting as adults of the lessons that we learn from the scriptures, lessons we learn from God, lessons we learn from the Bible. The children have a sense of innocence. My word, let's get back to innocence in our life. Let's get back to this idea that we're not these crusty old adults that we've turned into, but that there is that part of us that is still innocent. That is what Jesus is trying to speak to. That is what he's calling to in us, is that sense of innocence. Giving generously. Have you ever noticed that a child, one of their traits is they always want to share? They always want to share. Now, some don't. I had friends that were young and they said, no, you can't have, that's mine. You don't get any of it. But most children, they like to share. It's that giving. And we should be people like that as adults who like to share. We not only get the good graces from God, the mercy and the love and the forgiveness, but we should be sharing the knowledge, the love, the mercy, forgiveness with those around us. Being content. I've known so many people in relationships and in life, as they become adults, they're never content. It's always keeping up with not just the Joneses, keeping up with the Kardashians, keeping up with the Rockefellers, keeping up with all the billionaires that exist in this world. They're not content. There's a saying that true happiness comes from wanting what you have and not always trying to have what you want. It's that being content with what we have. Be content that Jesus is who was prophesied by the prophet Zechariah and others. Be content that the Spirit of God can and will dwell within you if you but open yourself to it. Freely expressing love is another trait. Freely expressing love. The beauty of a child is that you see them and that smile, and they're just giving themselves fully to you because they haven't limited or restricted themselves. As adults, we seem to pick and choose. We seem to not be willing to openly share love. Jesus is saying, be childlike. Be people as adults who are open to sharing love freely. And in doing so, you will be receiving it freely from God. Getting up after a fall. A child is out playing. Look at how many times they fall down. They get right back up. They fall down, they get up. They fall down, they get up. We as adults, the older we get, we fall down, maybe in business, maybe in a relationship, and it's tough for us to get back. It's when we fall off the horse, tough to get back up on the horse. One of the lessons that I wrote into my script of Thomas is watching Jesus carrying his cross, and he falls. And then he gets up and he falls and he gets up and he falls and he gets up. And I wrote into my script, Thomas say, seeing Jesus do that, every time after that in my life, whenever I have a burden, whenever I fall, I'm reminded that Jesus always got up. So we need to get back to being of that mindset that when life makes us fall, we get back up, get back up. And then lastly, the last trait I'll mention is being believers. A child is always wanting to believe you, especially if you're the parent and you're talking to your child. They just want to believe you. You tell them things and they trust you and they believe you. We have to, as followers of Christ, as people who want to be burdened, pass our burdens on to Him, to have the Spirit dwell within us, we have to be people who are trusting, people who are believers. So there you have the traits of childhood, the things that we have to do to be childlike, which is what Jesus says we have to be if we're truly going to grasp and understand what the prophets of old were saying, what it means to have the Spirit, as St. Paul says in his letter to Romans, dwell within us. And in order for us to truly trust that we can turn our burdens over and be yoked together with Christ. He wrote, "Come to me, all who labor and are burdened, and I will give you rest." If you want that kind of rest that comes from joy and love and understanding and peace, then we have to allow ourselves to be yoked together with Christ. And to do that, we have to get back to some of those childlike traits. Now I want to end today, this is 4th of July weekend, with a 4th of July message that I wrote. And I wasn't planning on doing this, but I got so many affirming messages from people saying that they really liked what I said and wrote that I'm going to end the reflection today by reading it to you. Dear friends, I want to wish you a very happy 4th of July. I realize that this year will present challenges to traditional grand celebrations. That, however, does not change the reason for the celebration. Thanks to the very nature of this country and the contributions of those who fought and died to protect and preserve this republic, we have liberty and freedom that other countries do not share. Does that mean we are perfect or that we have completed our growth as a nation? Not at all. It simply means that it is fitting to remember those who gave of themselves and in many cases paid the ultimate price for our right to gather together as people of faith. As Americans and as people of faith, we have two emblems to look to and count on: the cross and the flag. 35 years ago, I preached a sermon called "The Ragged Old Flag and the Old Rugged Cross." They were important to me back then and remain even more so today. I'm aware of all the protests and politically charged debates and controversies. It is my hope and my prayer that this 4th of July, instead of taking a knee in protest, that the entire country drop to both knees and pray. Pray to our Creator God, giving thanks for all His many blessings, and ask for His help to find a peaceful resolution to all the hate, anger, and bloodshed. We can pray that true leaders will come forward with goals and plans for a peaceful resolution to the things that divide this great nation. Respectfully, in Christ, Mark Price. Well, there you have it. Amen. This is Mark Price. Thanks for listening.